King Henry has the reputation as a young man as an intelligent and sensitive patron of the arts. Over time, however, he will become increasingly paranoid, enormously fat and unhealthy, killing many who refuse to accept his vision of his new divine order. Queen Catherine gives Henry a daughter, Maria, but then has several miscarriages and fails to produce a male heir. King Henry, frustrated with the fact that he does not have a male heir, then asks the Pope for an annulment to his marriage of, well, basically 20 years, on the grounds that he is committing incest by being married to his brother's wife, the Spanish Catholic Queen of Aragon. But the church prohibits divorce, and an annulment seems out of the question. And divorce, says King Henry VIII, is the only option left to me. It's the only way I'm going to produce a son and heir, is to get rid of Queen Catherine. This personal squabble with the Church of Rome will soon spark a reign of terror that will last for many decades. Now, Thomas More, the king's longtime friend and advisor, who was a highly respected public official and, gifted writer, his devotion to both the king and the Catholic Church was well known and without question. Thomas knows that Henry's marriage to Queen Catherine is valid and advises the king that the Pope will never agree to an annulment or a divorce. Says King Henry VIII, who's the Pope to tell me, the ruler of England, what to do? Henry was at times an arrogant, avaricious monarch. Basically used to getting his own way. And when no permission from Rome is forthcoming, the king declares himself the supreme head of the Church of England and nullifies his marriage to the Spanish Catherine. He does this all by himself. Even as the case was being decided in Rome, Henry marries a new queen, Anne Boleyn. Henry likes the taste of the church's power and decides that he wants another mouthful. So in 1534, the Act of Supremacy, his royal decree, proclaims him, the king, the absolute authority and supreme power over the new Church of England. King Henry's religious reformation will become one of the fundamental ingredients in the shaping of the British Isles, and greatly increases the power of the monarchy, transferring to the crown the wealth of the monasteries via new clerical taxes and confiscation of land and property. The king now becomes the supreme authority in supervising church government and legislation in Parliament. Essentially a 1-2 punch. Henry forms the Anglican Church, the Anglican Iglesia, and he alone has the power of reform. The Church of England is in fact a combination of Catholicism and Protestant theology. It's Episcopal in nature, with bishops and holy sacraments, but also accepts much of the Lutheran Protestant Reformation. It's a mixture of Catholic biblical tradition that is also committed to Protestant personal devotion. Basically, Catholic theological and ritual continuity linked to Protestantizing and Puritanizing. King Henry, who once was personally or profoundly devoted to the papacy and rewarded with the title Defender of the Faith, is excommunicated by the Pope and settles the nature of the new and independent Anglican Church. Basically, religious authority modeled after that of the bygone Roman emperors. Under King Henry's reforms, traditional Catholic services are stripped of their imagery. The colorful ceremonies and rituals are replaced by Protestant prayer books and Bibles. And in the rural parishes, this was deeply resented by the common people. We are not amused. Many of the common people viewed this as an extension into the religious sphere by King Henry. Basically, a further centralization of his existing policies, as well as cultural imperialism. Now, in Wales, in Scotland, and in Ireland, this amounted to nothing less than a major challenge to the indigenous Celtic Catholic culture, a serious intensification of existing linguistic and cultural uniformity. And this was perceived by the Welsh, by the Scottish, and the Irish as both a spiritual and political threat. Now, Thomas More, let's get back to Thomas More, the king's friend and advisor, was among the first and the few to reject Henry's claim as supreme head of the new Anglican Church, the Church of England. More had at one point in his life considered a priestly vocation, but decides to marry in 1505 and has 4 children. Thomas is a man of notable learning, and he has friendships and correspondences with many scholars all over Europe. He's a highly respected individual. Now, he's called to the bar and becomes a brilliantly successful lawyer, but he devotes his leisure time to literature, and he becomes a social critic and patron of the arts. Now, Thomas More's principal literary work, Utopia, which means no place, is, a speculative political essay written in Latin. Utopia is about the search for the best possible form of government. In the text, More meets at Antwerp a traveler called Raphael Hythloday. Hythloday has discovered Utopia on a mysterious island. On this island, communism rules. There's general law under the land, one law for everyone. There's a natural system of education that is extended to both men and women, which is unheard of at the time. The book becomes very popular and is translated into French, German, Italian, Spanish. Rapid fame for Thomas and his work Utopia. Now, the name Utopia, which is coined by More, passes into general usage and into many future fiction, fantasies, and blueprints for tomorrow. For example, you have Bacon, Sir Francis Bacon, and New Atlantis. You have Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels, and of course Morris, News from Nowhere. This is just to name a few. More, in Utopia, describes a pagan and communist state with institutions and policies governed by reason, a land filled with order and dignity. A notable contrast to the unreasonable state of the rest of Europe, not to mention England, in his own time. England is divided by self-interest and, of course, greed for wealth and power. Thomas More believes strongly in the power of the Pope and Catholicism, and he also strongly believes in his utopian vision of society. So he strongly opposes the rise of Protestants in England and Henry's defiance from the Pope, and he refuses to take the oath attached to the King's Act of Succession. Thomas tells his friend John Fisher that the King is requiring us all to deny everything that we hold dear and true. Fisher, Thomas's friend, had once been the Bishop of Rochester, but was dismissed by King Henry VIII due to his support of Rome and the Pope. Fisher agrees with Thomas More and feels that they must stand their ground. Now, the Pope, who is Paul III, in response to the king's actions dismissing Fisher, nominates Fisher to be a cardinal and gives him a symbolic promotion. Henry, in a fury, declares that even if the Pope sends that damned red hat, Fisher will not have a head to put it on. Thomas More refuses several times to accept the king's act of royal supremacy, and he refuses to sign the oath attached to the act. He is soon under arrest for high treason. For the next 15 months, Thomas More is imprisoned in the Tower of London. Among his fellow prisoners is his friend John Fisher. During the first months of his incarceration, More writes his best spiritual work, Dialogue of Comfort Against Tribulation, and he also writes treatises on Christ's Passion. Many efforts were made by King Henry VIII to force Thomas to accept his power and authority over the church. The monarch confiscates More's lands and property, and More's family is thrown into dire poverty. Meanwhile, the legal actions against religious dissenters in England intensifies. On May 5th, 1535, Thomas watches from his window in the tower as monks and priests are led to their execution. They are dragged through the streets of London to Tyburn Gallows, where they are given a chance to recant their views with the offer of a royal pardon. All of them refuse. They will not die easily. The monks and priests are first hanged, then drawn and quartered. This is a very gruesome way to die. It's a slow and painful process that begins with slow strangulation. When they are near death, they are then cut down and disemboweled alive. Their intestines, their innards, are then cast onto the fire. This is happening before their very eyes. Then, while they are still alive, they are hacked, limb from limb, and finally beheaded. Well, then on June 17th, after pardoning his executioner, More's friend John Fisher is beheaded. His head was first boiled, cooked to perfection, and then put on display for 2 weeks on the London Bridge before being thrown into the Thames River. Thomas knows he will soon be next, and a week later he is brought to trial. Though Thomas More is weak from malnutrition and many months of imprisonment in the Tower, More gives a spirited defense that is the very definition of moral fiber and courage. More tells his accusers that no prince or king can take upon himself the spiritual preeminence given by Christ to St. Peter. But there is never any doubt about the outcome of the trial. The game is rigged, and a sentence of death is soon passed on Thomas More. More responds with conviction, "I hope that we may yet meet merrily in heaven, all of us together in our eternal salvation." On July 6, 1535, Thomas More was executed on Tower Hill. He's witty, brave, and cheerful to the last. He adjusts his beard. He plays with his beard for the chopping block, saying that his beard had committed no crime and does not deserve to be chopped. His head was also put on display, just like Fisher, until it was purchased by his daughter Margaret, with funds donated in secret by those sympathetic to her father's unjust fate.